For years, Greek and Roman sculpture has been inaccurately presented and accepted in their classical white marble forms. There are few museum descriptions and educational texts that shed light on the truth of their once colorful surfaces, while there are many more that continue to perpetuate the idea of an all-white past. This perspective of ancient statuary removes the objectives of artists and sculptors and paints an unrealistic picture of the ancient world. This is color in antiquity, what we're not talking about. There are several reasons as to why society has long believed that these statues were bare marble. Some of the most obvious being that over time, sculptures and architecture were worn down by weathering and exposure to the elements. While buried artifacts may have retained more color, their pigments were hidden under layers of dirt, only to be mistakenly cleaned away. A key player in the belief that these statues were bare marble was Johann Joachim Winckelmann. Winckelmann was a German scholar, archaeologist, and art historian who studied theology and medicine before uncovering a passion for Greek art. With works such as The History of the Art of Antiquity and reflections on the painting and sculpture of the Greeks, he asserted that Greek art, particularly statues such as the Apollo of the Belvedere, were the epitome of beauty. Winckelmann's publishings were widely popular in Europe, and his work continues to help define art history today. Winckelmann had failed to realize that these marble statues were often Roman replicas of Greek bronze statues. The Romans had changed the sculpting material for longevity and durability rather than aesthetic purposes. During the Renaissance, several artists made replicas of these statues as well, failing to realize they had once been painted and furthering the idea of their all-white appearance. Color was a key characteristic of Greek and Roman sculpture, but their current states causes oversight. Dismissing color on these sculptures also dismisses their objectives and purposes. What were artists trying to convey? Was there meaning behind each color used? Other than not fully understanding these sculptures, ignoring their colorful surfaces also excludes an entire profession of artistry from ancient history. More recent research has pointed to the existence of color in ancient sculptures in Europe. Most research has focused on Greek examples. While other studies have focused on Roman sculptures, there seems to be much more that needs to be clarified and understood between the two. An extensive project cataloging Roman imperial period statues of the Bardo Museum found that 180 of the 500 documented sculptures showed traces of polychromy, with X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, UV light, and microscopes contributing to the understanding of these samples. Several professionals in the field of Greek and Roman statuary agree that they, along with public buildings, had polychromatic surfaces. Scholars believe that these finishings were integral to their meanings, with other adornments and attachments used to dramatize their visual impacts. A research project and exhibition named The Gods in Color toured 21 cities in Europe and North America, featuring high-quality plaster replicas of ancient statues, colorfully painted as they would have been in antiquity. This exhibition was a sensory experience that asserted the use of color on these statues, along with the ancient belief that color was instrumental and synonymous with textures and materials. In the 1st century AD, Roman writer Pliny criticized new color palettes made from luxury materials. It is speculated that his thoughts were built on ancient Greek tradition in which color was thought to be foundational to human existence, with the body itself a color system. Ancient statues held several different purposes in antiquity, with ancient writers describing them as their other population. With marble's luminous properties, such as crystalline calcium carbonate, the surface of marble projects a glow which would allow these sculptures to seem lifelike. Another literary text from Pliny describes the destruction of a late emperor's statue. His description indicates the significance of color, in this case gold leaf, and how they emphasize the life and death of these sculptures as well as the people they represented. The combination of material and literary resources gives us the potential to further understand the significance of sculptural polychromy. Color News, an official publication of the Munsell Research Laboratory in 1924, further supports and accepts the coloring of classical sculptures, pointing out that traces of color pigment were scarce, but were generally found in places such as the hair and the eyes. Painting is not believed to be purely ornamental, as these statues were often decorated with other ornate materials. In places such as the Parthenon in Athens, it is believed that the style and application of paints on areas such as the upper structure were done so that its appearance from a distance would be visually pleasing. In contrast, Roman architecture reserved colorful paints for the private interior of temples and homes, whereas the public color palette remained more neutral, giving insight into social characteristics of the Romans.
In the 18th century, a German art historian J.J. Wickelmann popularized the idea about Roman and Greek statues to be white. This became famous in the Enlightenment era. It is believed he knew about polychromy but preferred the beauty of white marble. It was believed marble in antiquity was luxurious and expensive to get. The first study of polychromy in Roman statues was on the province of Africa Proconsularis in Tunisia. Five sculptural fragments from the 2nd and 3rd century AD were examined using XRF techniques, resulting in various pigments detected. This study demonstrates the value of color in visual perception and highlights the continuity between Greek and Roman tradition in statues animated through color. Five statues were analyzed in the Africa Proconsularis study. This consisted of Athena Lemia, Athena Parthenos, a warrior's left leg, the colossal left foot, and the colossal elbow. Some of the colors identified were gold, yellow, purple, red, white, black, orange, and blue-green. As noted in some of these statues, pigmentation can be identified in the hair, in the helmet, cap, frontal medallion, skin, eye, sandal, and even the drapes. The stratigraphy shows gold foil on yellow layer, red on yellow, blue on yellow, and red on yellow. The results in this study reveal that statues were meant to convey movement or animate the statue, to give a sense of relief to the statue, to integrate details, to distinguish particular material qualities, to convey an enhanced religious message in the statues, but also to render shadows and depth, enhancing three-dimensionality and depicting material qualities such as metal. In the Gods in Color exhibition, Rod Greenland validates that paint was important for sculptures to represent most recognizable images in antiquity. For instance, the Prima Porta Augustus represented a face of the young empire, the eternal Rome, and the imperator's masculine virtue through its nicely arranged hair with facial features. A team of historians, classical archaeologists, and chemists working on this exhibit stated that in the Prima Porta, everything irrespective of function was colored in the same lively colors. Color brings all these images to life. For example, the red and blue paints on the breastplate from Augustus creates a graphic novel of the mythical images coming out of the surface. With the new innovative techniques in color and pigmentation, now researchers can do color reconstruction. Some techniques used include UV-VIS absorption spectroscopy and X-ray fluorescence measurement. Colorants can be adjusted to reconstruct precise original colors. Because of this UV-Vis absorption spectroscopy is a physical and optical method of measurement, shades can even be identified and individual sensory impressions can also be detected. A literary proof of color used in Greece and Rome comes from Marcus Vitruvius Pollio, the Roman architect and engineer under Emperor Augustus. In his book De Architectura or 10 Books on Architecture, Book 7, Chapters 7 through 14, he discusses the different origins, uses, and applications of natural and artificial colors in antiquity. Vitruvius discusses colors that are dug up, for instance yellow ochre, identified in Italy in the Athenian silver mines, where galleries were dug up underground. Red earths can be found at Sinope in Pontus, Egypt, the Balearic Islands of Spain, and the island of Limnos. Colors are also identified on the facades of Macedonian tombs, for instance King Philip II at Vergina, Aigai. Vitruvius discusses the uses of vermilion color in the walls of peristyles, but after 30 days it would turn a mottled color, then owners would hire painters to apply other colors in the same process as marble statues. He also alludes to the elaboration of artificial colors. Methods used in Alexandria with different ingredients such as sand, flowers of natron, and copper were made to make blue or purple. This quote alludes to the purpose of his book, describing the methods and means of attaining paint, natural qualities of all the colors, and the making process. An example from archaeology is the Apulian column crater from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, representing an encaustic painter working on a statue of Heracles. In the statue, Heracles is holding a club on his hand, he appears nude and using a lion skin. Notice the painter working on the sculpture. Scholars such as von Bothmer suggested the statue was marble as being painted in an encaustic technique. The application of paint was done in two separate processes, mixing pigment and wax and applied with a tool Pliny calls cestrum as depicted in the crater. In the second step, this paste was applied and painters didn't sign their works with the usual expression, but with a so and so burn it in. The scene also alludes to the next stage. Notice the artist holding on the other hand a small bowl with the color with a container for the different wax paints. We can see the presence of an assistant on his left side preparing the tools for the next step in the painting process. The scholar von Bothmer alluded to identifying this artist as a painter and a sculptor or both. Other scholars believe the painter to be Hephaestus, suggesting he's adding the last touches on a marble statue of Heracles in Mount Olympus for the apotheosis of this hero. Marconi believes the representation of the gods and mortals are a bridge to humans since next to a statue of a god stands a living god. The practice of painting statues on bases in white to distinguish them from the living figures goes back to the High Classical period. For instance, the crater in Bonn in 420 BC, showing the finding of the egg from which Helen was born. Researchers now understand the cooperation between painters and sculptors, which started in the Archaic period, introduced only in the 4th century. Marconi speculates that both sculpture and painter were equally important during the 3rd century. In an inventory of the year 279 in Delos, a new wooden agalma was commissioned for the festival of Dionysus in the month of Galaxion. This agalma was a phallus in the form of a bird in a procession in a cart. The payment was 5 drachmas for the sculpture, Aristoteles, and the painter the nomenes, this indicates the equal level of prestige they both had. One of the reasons this myth is still persistent in our era could be the unpainted versions of statues we know today was an accident of gradual decline legitimized by Western civic values.
The idea that Greek and Roman sculpture were complete in their bare marble forms seems to have been an oversight, at least in the beginning. Color pigments were mistaken for dirt or debris or simply absent due to being worn away. However, this champion aesthetic of classical white marble has become so ingrained in society that it is difficult for us to see anything else. Museums, textbooks, even home decor, with Greek and Roman busts becoming popular in recent years, contribute to the idea that these statues were meant to exist without color. It is difficult to challenge what we know and information from those we think are reliable, such as Winckelmann, especially when they are still prominent today.
The harm for this theory and disinformation is not telling the truth to people, weaponizing the notion of white supremacy in our times, and simply covering the cultural true values from people in antiquity.
This theory ultimately serves those who believe that ancient Greece, Rome, and the classics in general stem from an all white lineage. It contributes to Eurocentricity and whitewashes ancient peoples, ignoring how they related to each other culturally outside of skin tone. Doing this strips away the identity of ancient Greeks and Romans and allows groups such as white supremacists and the alt right to weaponize the classics in order to further their own objectives and validate their own narratives.